Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Draft. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And every Wednesday, I talk with people in the media about the important stories that they're covering. So, joining me today is Joe Sudbay, and he is the host of State of the States on SiriusXM. And I've had the pleasure of being on that show before. So, glad to return the favor and have you on our show, Joe.
Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you for inviting me. I've always enjoyed our conversations, and yeah, so look forward to this.
Great. Well, I spoke with Joe back when I was the editor at the Michigan Advance, so we talked a lot about state politics there, and I know that is a real passion of yours. And so I thought we could definitely talk about the state of the media, but also the Virginia elections, which are coming up fast and furious in less than a month and a half. And I know that is something that a lot of folks are keeping an eye on because it's one of those first tests of the Trump administration. And I think will probably be a referendum on the president. So I know you've been talking with a lot of folks who are running there. So that'll be interesting too. But I thought, we may as well start with Jimmy Kimmel since he came back yesterday. Um, I believe his opening monologue has been seen about 10 million times at this point. And Donald Trump couldn't help himself but weigh in and really try to put pressure on ABC. So it wasn't just the FCC chair, Brendan Carr. Trump himself is going hard on this issue. But, Joe, let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel because, he's kind of an unlikely person that we're all talking about. I mean, he's a comedian, he's a talk show host. Yes, he cracks jokes about Trump, but I mean, basically he's just here to entertain. And there's a long tradition going back to Johnny Carson of late night talk show hosts. They always poke fun at elected officials, at the president. But now he's kind of become this free speech martyr. So what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I have to say it was really interesting to watch kind of the conversations many of us have been having about autocracy and fascism, and all of a sudden it left kind of the political silo and really burst into popular culture in a
Hmm.
way that really resonated with people. And something about it made it very real for people. And look, I did watch on YouTube last night. I couldn't watch in DC because WJLA, the local affiliate, is a Sinclair affiliate. So
And
I
they
couldn't watch
still
it.
refuse to run it,
So,
and so does Nexstar.
right. So, but I watched it on YouTube, and I checked this morning too. It was about 10 million views. And I think there's just something really took it outside of another of the inside the bubble kind of conversation and made it very real for people. You have the president of the United States who was so thin-skinned, he wanted to take a comedian off the air, and a major corporation, Disney, caved to the president of the United States, and it just felt so uh, un-American. And
Right.
I was really surprised at the reaction. I was really encouraged by the reaction to see so many folks doing it. Disney took a hit financially.
Yeah,
They knew
about $4 billion, I believe.
yeah, so I canceled Hulu. I mean, we canceled Hulu. I just said, "I'm not doing it." So and then last night I thought, like I said, I watched, I think millions and millions of us did. I thought it was pitch perfect. I thought he did a very good job. And I never watch late night TV. I
Right.
get clips the next day. Um, but yeah, I thought he did a brilliant job and just kind of reminded us where we are in this moment and how important it is that we do not let an authoritarian take over our country, and we need to fight back. And I think the other important thing it showed was that when you fight back, when you organize, we can win. This president is
Yes.
invincible. He is not omnipotent. This is still the United States of America. Republicans on Capitol Hill may have given him all their power, but the American people, most of us, and G. Elliott Morris, who does Strength in Numbers, did a good analysis this week too. An overwhelming majority of Americans do not approve of what this president's doing, and they're starting to make their voices heard more. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to date myself here, but the first time that I really knew of Jimmy Kimmel was back when I think I was in college and he was the host of The Man Show on Comedy Central with Adam Carolla. And of course, back then I wasn't a huge fan. I was not the target audience of that, of course. But, he's not like this big leftist figure. He's a comedian, he's an entertainer. Certainly, he has been critical of President Trump. He has, spoken very eloquently about the need for good healthcare in this country, with his child's experience, but just the experience that so many of us have in this country, who obviously don't have all of the advantages that someone like Jimmy Kimmel has, and he's very aware of that. But basically, very few people go into stand-up comedy because they wanna be pushing some sort of a political agenda. They're there to entertain and to crack jokes and to give us a little respite. And so I feel like this issue really resonated because it didn't hit on party lines like I think Trump was thinking it would. There are a lot of folks who just don't want to be told by anyone, no matter who is the president, what they should find funny, what they should be watching. I mean, this is America. This isn't Hungary. This isn't Russia. And we're used to being able to make our own decisions. And when we don't want something, we don't watch it. And that's the way the free market is supposed to work. And up until this administration, that was a big value for Republicans of, capitalism and letting the market decide. Now, all of a sudden, Trump has changed the rules and he wants to tell us all what to do. And that is un American. And I think it chafed a whole lot of people. And I'm glad that Disney got the message that there are more of us than there are folks who really, want the president to be all powerful and to dictate what we can and cannot see.
Absolutely, and at its core, this really was about Donald Trump's feelings being hurt. It really
Mhm.
was. This is exactly what it was. He is so thin-skinned, and that's what it was. It was nothing. I saw there's some effort right now to spin away the idea. Well, no, see, Trump really didn't try to do this. He told us last night, again, on True Social, yes, I want Jimmy Kimmel off the air. It basically because he makes fun of me. And, if you're that thin skinned, you have some problems, which we know he does.
Yeah, I mean it's really beyond parody, but there seems to be this this is probably a harsh term, but really a psychosis amongst folks like Trump and Elon Musk, where they just cannot stand being ridiculed. They cannot stand that they are not universally adored. And they want to somehow mandate that. I mean, Elon Musk paid an inordinate amount of money to buy Twitter. So that he could control what people see and force his way into people's algorithms because he's weird and people don't like him unless he is, forced into their feed. And now Donald Trump is trying to do that from the Oval Office, which is even scarier than a billionaire with a private corporation because he has the weight of the government. He's using the FCC to fight these personal petty battles against Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert. And you know, I think that we are at a moment right now where he is not popular, as you pointed out. The polling shows that. And I feel like corporations and even a lot of members of Congress really overestimate how popular he is just because he did win the election. And he did, and he won the popular vote. But what he has done in office has really torn down any reason why people voted for him. They wanted inflation to go down. It's up. They wanted some common sense solutions for immigration, and instead he's rounding up people at Home Depots. This is not what people envisioned. And you and I, who spend way too much time looking at politics and, breaking down his speeches, we knew where he was going with this. But if you just caught headlines, you thought he's going to round up the bad guys, he's going to fix the economy. Okay, let's do something different. well, we got something different, but it's something that people really don't like. And the idea of pandering to this guy and making decisions that are going to cost your corporation billions of dollars, that I hope that more companies are seeing that this is a bad bet.
I agree with you. I hope companies, I hope law firms, I hope universities get the message that he's wildly unpopular. And like you said, many people voted for Trump thinking he's a businessman. He's a businessman. Josh Johnson, who's on The Daily Show, has a good riff on this recently. I saw a clip of him on explaining this. He said he's a businessman, but no one ever says he's a good businessman because he wasn't. He's a businessman. And he promised, "I'm gonna lower price on day one." Even I think yesterday it was at the UN when he gave that rambling, scary speech, bizarre speech, which my cousins around I have cousins in different countries were sending me saying, "What the hell is this?" Because the
Yeah.
broadcast in other countries as well. But, he talked about how prices are going down. You know what? You can lie about a lot of things, but when you go to the grocery he can lie and tell you one thing that's not true, whatever. But when you go to the grocery store and you see how much hamburger costs, and you know when you get your receipt how much more you're spending, you're that's your life, you know it. Donald Trump can say all he wants. He's not telling you the truth, and I think that's been really harsh, and that's where some of his worst numbers are on dealing with the economy and inflation, which were supposed to be some of his best numbers. And the same thing on immigration. I mean, what's really been amazing to me, and it's an issue I've worked on many years, is how intense the opposition is to the mass deportation. Now, they were very clear about it. He was very clear. Stephen Miller had a plan. Stephen Miller said it was going to be the largest infrastructure project in American history. He just got $150 billion in that budget bill to do what he's doing right now on a bigger scale. But what people are seeing it, and it's what's been so interesting to me, Susan, is there really hasn't been a lot of leadership from the Democrats on this. They've been told to stay away from these kind of issues, which
Right.
2024 as opposed to 2025. And the immigration groups are spending most of their time trying to protect people. A lot of this opposition to what they're seeing on mass deportation is coming from people seeing it in their communities and freaking
Yeah.
out. And it's happening to people they know. And so that's been really interesting. And look, Donald Trump hired undocumented workers. Of course he did. He was in construction. He had restaurants. He had golf courses. He had vineyards. I met some of the women who worked for him. He knew
Uh,
it. He knew it. And one thing it's really interesting to me is I've seen several articles where farmers are calling their members of Congress saying, "What the hell are you doing to us? I'm losing my workforce." So these are farmers who have undocumented workers calling their Republican members of Congress saying, "Help us. I'm losing my workforce. People aren't showing up. People are leaving." And these Republican members of Congress hearing this, knowing, "Oh, yes, these are my constituents, probably my donors, who are telling me they hire undocumented workers and Donald Trump's screwing them over." And what's fascinating is their first instinct isn't to say, "Wait a minute, you're hiring undocumented workers? That's illegal. I need to call ICE." Of course they don't do that. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna try and fix this because we know you can't lose your workforce." It's one of those things that drives me crazy. Everyone in this country knows. I'm on SiriusXM Progress a lot. I'll get calls and people start ranting about immigrants. And I'll just say, "Did you eat today? If you ate today, the food you ate came through the hands of immigrants. Whether you like it or not, that's reality." And I'm not saying all workers are undocumented, but a lot of them are in ag, um, in construction, in hospitality. And the other thing is a lot of folks who have had status, temporary protected status, are losing it. So if you're elderly, you're getting older and your parents have elder care or someone in your family has care, understand you may lose those workers because they're losing their status. And that is a decision from Donald Trump and Stephen Miller as well. So it's the immigration thing is r- is so pervasive and people hate it.
right. And then these farmers are also getting hit by Trump's tariffs because they're not selling anything to China anymore, which is a huge market.
Yep.
And so Trump's solution, just like it was during his first term, is basically to bribe them with bailouts, which should be an indication that things are not working. You only bail out industries when they are failing. But he's doing it again. He's doing it on steroids. Not to mention the fact that with these tariffs, most of us don't live in a place where we can have year-round fruits and vegetables, and so we have to import our basically many of the things that are part of our standard diets. I happen to live in Michigan. Yes, we have a great agricultural sector here, but we also have winter about 6 months out of the year. And so things do not grow during that time. And there is no way that you're going to get fresh blueberries and strawberries coming from the US. Those come from overseas. And so he's disrupted so much with our economy. It's no wonder that all of our indicators, except for, perhaps the stock market, are going the wrong way. Unemployment, inflation. You see month after month that jobs numbers are being revised downward,
Yep.
and this is all. Uh, I don't want to say it's an unforced error because we knew that his policies would end up here, but he took an economy that, while was not perfect and certainly had its weak points from Biden, but was growing every single month under Joe Biden, and he took that and he flushed that growth down the toilet because of his idiotic fixation on tariffs and the fact that is in. uh, he is just completely dedicated to making sure that inequality explodes in this country. He wants all of the wealth to flow upward for his friends, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and the rest of us are getting screwed, especially people who are the poorest in this country. And the economy does not work well. I mean, we have lots of history on this. And uh, I don't think that we are being chicken littles to say that this sort of economic policy in the 1920s did not end up very well for us in the US. Not to mention the fact that his foreign policy is a disaster as well. And maybe that's not something we feel every day, but when he stands before the United Nations, he does not have the stature that the United States should have because he's not there for our friends. He is cutting off aid to countries that surround Russia to help out Russia. There was a weird course correction yesterday with Ukraine, and I'm curious about your thoughts on that. But overall, I think the message is pretty clear, and you tell me if this is the message that people are going with in Virginia. We're less safe. Our economy is doing worse. Everything has gotten worse under Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that's right, and even with tariffs, another lie, you're not gonna pay the tariffs, the foreign governments are. Well, guess what? People are finding out you're paying the tariffs because you are. It's like, it's basic. I wish someone Porter would just make him explain it because he can't. Um, I saw the head of Social Security the other day talk about maybe they're gonna increase the retirement age too.
Right.
You so all of these things, this is what they're doing. So it's really interesting, Susan. I get to talk to a lot of candidates. I guest host a lot on SiriusXM, but my passion is my show called State of the State. So I talk to a lot of candidates who are running in special elections. And we've really been a massive overperformance this year. There was a special election yesterday down in Georgia, Senate District 21. It was a runoff. Deborah Shigley, she overperformed by 11 or 12 points. And this was a race that Republicans had 5 or 6 weeks to prepare for because she had overperformed in the jungle primary a couple weeks ago. And they
Ah,
still really overperformed. She lost, but it was very red. Um,
mm,
I talked to Caitlin Dray a couple weeks ago out in Iowa's first Senate district, and it's interesting. And there's kind of a theme that, and I hear it in Virginia too. People want to talk about affordability because the one reason I love talking to state leg candidates, and I should just kind of preface it with all this is, unlike if you're running for Congress or Senate, you have consultants who tell you what to do. You might go to some events, but you're not knocking doors. You're not going up
mm,
the door. You don't know people. And state ledge candidates, you have to knock doors and you have to be real because you can't go in with these are my talking points. I can say it just this way because people have bullshit detectors, right? BS detectors. So it's really interesting, you know, when and so many of them, like Caitlin Trey, when I first talked to her, she said, I can't wait to go knock doors. And I talked to her right before the election. She had knocked thousands of doors, had so many conversations, and people really wanted to talk about affordability. But there was also kind of like this sub theme of chaos that's happening. Like people are just tired of the chaos. And this is
Yeah.
particularly Virginia. Now, Virginia, early voting's underway right now, actually, in Virginia. It started last week. Virginia, they're electing governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. And they have 100 seats in the House of Delegates on the ballot. And this, for the first time ever, Democrats recruited 100 candidates for those 100 seats. Now, Democrats currently control the House 51-49. But just to give you some perspective on how this first election matters in the presidential term, going into 2017, the first Trump year, um, Republicans controlled the House 66 to 34.
Wow.
All right. After the election it was 51-49. There was actually one tie vote and they actually they had to
I
pull,
remember that. Yeah.
so it would have been 50-50, but it was 51-49. Fascinating, right? So now the Republicans control, but and it's gone back and forth a little bit. But this year, the candidates, it has been amazing. Like I'm a geek, right? I love this kind of stuff. I love having these conversations, talking to folks who are out knocking doors, and I feel like sometimes I get better information from this than any of the polling or messaging I'll see emanate on Capitol Hill because it's not filtered, it's unfiltered, People wanna
Right.
talk and in Virginia, the Republicans want to make the whole issue about bathrooms because that's the only issue. What Elon Musk is weighing in again. They want to attack trans kids again. You know what? People want to talk about in education. They want Virginia to have the best education in the country, and they want their kids to be able to go to school and come home safely. Like, that's what education means. It's not where Republicans want to bring it. They want to talk about affordability and housing affordability and what's being done and what problems can be solved. It's like real stuff, like the things that matter to their lives. And, I feel like the Virginia elections are going to be a bellwether. And well, I'll tell you, there's one Republican candidate just dropped out. The reason he dropped out was because he lost his job as a government contractor and had to move away. Right. So Virginia,
Uh,
in addition to, being a bellwether, it has also felt the impact of what Elon Musk has done, which is why it's interesting he's weighing in. And the job losses have been extreme. But it's not just job losses, which matter. It's also funding cuts. There's a big military presence down in the southern part of the state along the
mhm.
coast, roads, Virginia Beach. There's a major institutions of higher learning that have had funding and research cut out in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech and at UVA. So Virginia's kind of like a microcosm. The Commonwealth is kind of diverse. It's a diverse Commonwealth, both in terms of population, but also in terms of economy. And so many aspects of the state have been hit by what Trump has done and is doing. And you pile this on with the ICE raids and the inflation and everything else. I really feel like these elections are going to be very important. And part of it is, Susan, you've been in Michigan, so you know. One of the things about, and I love talking to folks from all over the country, but because Virginia is DC adjacent, and because so
Mhm.
many local reporters live around here, it gets undue, even more attention. So that's why,
Right.
obviously, first elections of the Trump term, but also it's local for a lot of folks too.
Yeah, and you have an interesting situation where there is a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin. He's term limited because in Virginia you only get one term as governor, which is highly unusual, and so you always have change there. But he was supposed to be a rising star in the Republican Party, and he's been overshadowed by Trump now. But he's been contending with a Democratic legislature And Virginia has become a blue state for federal elections, but it's still a swing state. You still have a split between Northern Virginia that has so many workers in the federal workforce because of its proximity to DC. But then Southern Virginia is still very conservative, and it's really fascinating to hear what the dynamics are of that race because I remember back in 2024 for the presidential election, some of the early returns coming in from Virginia were a really good indication that Donald Trump was a lot stronger than people thought because he had made headway in a lot of those Northern Virginia suburbs where Kamala Harris was expected to maybe even build on what Biden had done in 2020. So I'm really interested to see in particular how those areas go if there's a strong swing back in the other direction.
Well, it's interesting. The first special elections of the year were actually in Virginia, and there were 2 Senate seats that were open because their respective members went to Congress. One was in Northern Virginia, one was kind of in ruralish southern part of the state, and then the Senate candidate gave up his House seat, so there were 2 Senate seats and a House seat.
Mm,
In days leading up to this, there was reporting in CNN. There was reporting at the New York Times. There was reporting at Politico. Can Democrats win? This is going to be the first test. Democrats are not enthusiastic. Things are bad.
right.
Everything terrible for Democrats. I spoke to one of the candidates who was terrific, and then election night happened, and Democrats, the 2 in Northern Virginia, the Senate and House seat, overperformed a little bit on Harris. They overperformed. The Democrat who ran in the Republican seat overperformed by like 10 or 15 points. It was Jack Trammell, overperformed at
Hmm.
at a stage, and it was so interesting. The only reporter who really picked up on it was Dave Weigel, who said, "Wow,
Mm,
Democrats actually really overperformed in Virginia." And there was been such an expectation that it was gonna be these were elections like, it was I've watched the DC media too closely. You could tell there was, like, this giddy, like, "Oh, boy, here it goes. We're gonna prove that this is gonna show that Donald Trump is omnipotent, and he's actually starting to help Republicans win in areas they don't win." That's not what happened at all. And then later that
right.
there was the special election in Eastern Iowa with Mike Zimmer, a terrific guy, just a terrific guy. The seat became available because the governor, Kim Reynolds, pulled the incumbent to be her lieutenant governor. They thought that seat was so safe. I talked to Mike right before his election, now Senator Zimmer. Just the nicest guy. Ran on a campaign of Iowa values. Like his social media the day before the election was Iowa was the second state to allow same-sex marriage. He didn't hide from any of that, and he won. He won, by, like, 4 points. It was a big shocker. So, I think we've seen that all through the year in some of these special elections for state legislature and for members of Congress. I mean, yesterday, Alida Grijalva won in her district, Arizona 7, a heavily Latino district, and it looks like she's gonna overperform by maybe 20 points, which is a good sign, I think, going into it. She also makes the 218th signatory to the, release the Epstein discharge petition, unless one of the 4 Republicans drop off. But, yeah, so I really feel like, um, it's just been really very helpful for me to have conversations with people who are outside of the DC bubble, who are actually talking to real voters,
Right.
hearing their real concerns. And again, you pick up these themes no matter. I talked to a couple folks from who were running in Florida a couple weeks ago, and in Florida, the issue is property insurance and housing and affordability, and it's just like it's and those are the issues that Donald Trump said he was gonna deliver on day 1, and he has not in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And we've seen this in so many special elections in red states, blue states, purple states. all across the country is that the pattern is clear. Democrats have been overperforming. And if you needed any more proof that this is happening, there's a reason why Donald Trump went to the governor of Texas and said, "Find me 5 more congressional seats," because he is scared what that means for his party in 2026. Donald Trump does not want to check on his power. Clearly, people have shown that that is what they want. And so he's trying to put his thumb on the scale, whether it's in Texas or Florida or Ohio or any number of red states that are willing to go along with his gerrymandering schemes. But I think that because Virginia is so close to the DC market, which is still overpopulated with reporters, as somebody who has, done so much local and state reporting, I can say it would be great if we could bring, even I would say a tenth of those reporters and put them out into middle America, where there are so many news deserts and people would love to have more reporting and options there. But I don't get to make those decisions. But I think you won't be able to ignore if Democrats do have a good night in Virginia, because there is so much focus on that. And at the end of the day, it is still a swing state. It is still a state that historically has, given us a sense of what the next election will bring. So I appreciate you telling us what's going on the ground there. I wanted to talk just a little bit about something that we had talked about before we went on air, because we were talking about how independent media has been growing, especially in the second Trump term, on platforms like Substack or YouTube, and a lot of journalists who've been going independent, like Jim Acosta, after he left CNN, and is now doing great on his own, which is inspiring. But you brought up how there are some parallels to about 20 years ago with the left wing, the liberal blogosphere, where that was during George W. Bush's second term. And he had this moment of supposed invincibility. It was after 9/11, and he, of course, overreached by trying to cut Social Security, which I think we'll see Trump do as well. But there was this real hunger for something different out there. People were really sick of, the same talking heads and the same whitewashing of the media. And to me, that's gotten even worse. When I read some of the accounts of Trump's speech at the UN, he seems pretty normal, like, "Oh, he said, America's great and you guys suck and you could learn something from us." Washington Post, I think, has been it's been so disheartening to see, because it really is one of America's great newspapers, and clearly they are taking their editorial direction from Bezos more than ever. Because when I read that, I was like, that is not what I just watched. And I think that it's a great time for people who are willing to tell the truth and to build up independent voices. And I'm just curious, because you're part of SiriusXM, and that, SiriusXM Progress, you have so many great voices, like Tom Hartman and Stephanie Rule. And so you guys have been doing this for years, but do you think that we can take advantage of this moment and build something better, because the mainstream media is clearly failing us?
Yeah, it's we're also gonna we're starting to lose PBS stations around the country, right?
Right,
So 20 you know, the things that spurred on the progressive blogosphere, the liberal blogosphere, were the war in Iraq, the 2004 elections, and then afterwards, there was this view that it reminded me so much of, December and January of this year, like, that George Bush was somehow omnipotent. He had, he had launched these wars and everything was gonna be great, and you're like, "This is not right." The media believed anything Karl Rove told them, and you can see it
right.
in a lot of the reporting now. Politico had an article yesterday about how Trump decided he had to do something about Tylenol because he was just so frustrated. What the? What is that? Give me a break. That was one of the most dangerous press conferences I've ever seen in my life. It scared the shit out of me, pardon my language. Um,
Absolutely.
um, but, so it's been interesting to see how much more media is popping up. And one of the things I think is so important, especially like I said, as we lose PBS, local media. And one of the things I always loved were the local blogs. It was like I love Michigan Advance. I love the local publications that do a good job covering their states because there's not a lot of it. Mississippi Free Press has been a godsend.
Yeah,
Had
absolutely.
colleagues there. Texas Tribune does a good job. But like it's interesting because one of the things dictators and autocrats like is they like being able to control the media and they like and it's I think it's a very important one. I used to many years ago, I date myself, but many years ago, decades ago, I worked with a guy named Jim Brady, who was Ronald Reagan's press secretary. He'd been shot
Right.
by in the assassination attempt, and Jim became an advocate for preventing gun violence. And I used to travel with him, and we used to go to state houses, and he loved it because he's a press guy, right? And
Mhm.
whenever we went to a state house, there would be a press conference and all the press people would come out because Jim was one of them, right? He was like a press guy, so they loved that. First, they were always a little tentative, didn't know what to do because they knew he'd been brain injured, but then he'd get into it. But there were always a lot of press at state houses, and you don't see that as much anymore because local media doesn't have the resources, and I think that's dangerous because that's where so much action happens. Susan, I mean, you covered Lansing for a long time. You know, so much happens there, and they really would prefer that a lot of it not get attention. So I kind of feel like the more we see independent folks realizing they can do it and get some support, and because you still have to work and you still have to pay your bills. I think it's important. It has a little bit of that same vibe to me of like things are different, things are shaking out differently. And look, I don't watch CNN. I haven't watched CNN forever. I see the clips when Aaron Rupert shares something, and I think that's how a lot of people get their news now.
Right.
Watch a panel of people, sitting around arguing with each other. I know it does nothing for me. It does nothing for the discourse as far as I'm concerned. So I think people have really decided, you know, find news sources you trust and people you trust and support them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my kids are both Gen Z. I mean, I don't think that they've ever willingly watched CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. It may have been on because I had it on or their dad did, but that's just not how they consume news. And you know what? They're onto something because when you do turn on, they cover only a few stories. I mean, they're on 24 hours, and yet there are so many stories that they miss. Very rarely do you see, the concerns of real everyday people on there. It's all about interpreting what Trump said, as opposed to folks who are trying to send their kids back to school, and all of a sudden they're paying twice as much for school supplies. Real things that impact people, and so I'm glad that there are some outlets out there where people can get news that they actually can use, and we can have longer discussions like this on important issues. And it makes me feel good as someone who's an old print reporter who has been told my entire career, "Oh, cut that down. Make it only 400 words. That's all people care about." But every day, what I read in newsletters, on Substack or on radio shows like yours is we have these in-depth discussions and people like them because people want to understand what's going on. And I do feel like that is one of the ways that we're going to save our democracy is proving them wrong, that people do want to be involved in their communities. They want to understand what's going on in their world, and we're not willing to just have everything dumbed down and watch what Donald Trump tells us to watch.
Absolutely. Like get out. There's such a little bubble. I call it the DC bubble. It's not even inside the Beltway bubble. It's like just this bubble of, what's in Punchbowl or what's in Politico and
Right.
Axios. Axios has a story. You know how many people see that? Just that inside the bubble they do it, but one of the things that drives me crazy is I'll see conversations, and there was this centrist meeting, and they said, "We've gotta get out and talk to people in the real world." Well, first of all, every member of Congress is not from DC, except for
Right.
Eleanor Norton. So, who are they talking to? A, and B, if you, on the Democratic side, wanna talk to people who aren't inside your bubble, go talk to your state legislators, your state legislative candidates. Talk to your county commissioners. Talk to your city councilors, your town councilors. Because you know what? When those folks go to the grocery store, everyone knows who they are, and people come up and talk to them and wanna talk to them about stuff every day. You know, it's where they live, and it's how the and they're knocking doors, and they're hearing from stuff. So you don't need to hire, you need to come up with a new narrative and spend millions and millions more on polling. Talk to your own people. Like, what a concept. Talk to your own people and build up the infrastructure in those states. That's one thing Republicans have done very well over the years. Republicans have invested at the state and local level. They have done it forever, and that's not what's happened on the Democratic side, and I've watched it for decades. It's been a big frustration of mine. It's one of the reasons I do my show, on SiriusXM Progress, is to shine a spotlight on the people who are literally knocking the doors, and the other thing to remember, and I always say this to folks, you may think what happens in state legislatures doesn't matter. Well, you brought up Texas. What happens in the Texas state legislature certainly matters for the rest of us, and it will with this gerrymandering. I'm gonna have some candidates on from Mississippi this week because they've done some redistricting, and there are some real opportunities for pickups. You think Mississippi doesn't matter to you? The Dobbs decision. And
Right.
one of the reasons Republicans like to go to Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi is because it's in the Fifth Circuit. So if they get challenged in those courts, it goes to the Fifth Circuit where they know they're gonna get a favorable decision and go to the Supreme Court. So what happens in the states really, really matters, and sometimes there's just a disconnect. I'm like, between kind of the mindset in DC and where things are actually happening. I think what Texas was a good reminder to everyone, that legislature and who wins those seats really matters, and it's one of the reasons Republicans gerrymander so much is because they don't want you to have the opportunity to, change policy at the state level, and one of the other things they're doing right now, Susan, is I mean, I know part of the reason you had redistricting in your state was because of the 2018 elections. They created fair districts in Michigan. And
Right.
and and now in Missouri, they're trying to change the referendum process. They want to put a ballot measure on to make it harder to pass referendum because what do they pass in Missouri? Abortion rights passed, minimum wage increase, Medicaid expansion. Can't get these things in the state house, but the people voted for them. So they want to
Right.
change that direct democracy. So it's so much is happening out in states. Fascinating.
Absolutely. And I hope that you will come back and talk with us more about what's going on in the States. It's great that you are talking with the folks who are on the ground there. And Joe, tell us how people can find you online and find your work.
I am only on Blue Sky really,
Hmm.
Joe. That's my name, Sudbay. I have an account on Substack. I don't really post anything there, mostly so I can do stuff like this, which is really fun and do it with friends. And then, I'm on SiriusXM, the Progress channel. It's 127 if you have SiriusXM. I guest host a lot, and then my show airs over the weekend, State of the States, which I say all the time. Susan, you reminded me when you were talking about having to write 400 words. I can't believe they pay me to talk. Like, I and talk about stuff we love. How fun is this? I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. I always enjoyed our conversations when you were on SiriusXM Progress with me. So thank you for inviting me today.
Great. Yes, we will definitely have to do it again. And thanks for all of you for joining us today.